be about environmental and sanitary engineering. And for our last speaker, she's currently the E&S team leader for a major hydropower development in Georgia with investment from South Korea, practiced environmental consulting, and became the market leader and service group manager for environment business in GHD Philippines, an international consultancy firm. She continued academic career right after completing her master's degree as assistant professor at the Department of Civil Engineering in UP Los Baños, where she received the recognition as one of the SEAT Outstanding Junior Faculty. She started her career as instructor at the Department of Civil Engineering in UP Los Baños right after graduation.
Yes, partner, and she also is practicing environmental and social professional with experience in the power and water industries. Her relevant project experience include environmental and social compliance monitoring performance of a major hydropower project development in Georgia, development of environmental and social impact assessment guidelines for the government of Nepal under IFC, and conduct for 3 small hydropower plant projects in Fiji Islands in the Pacific. Conduct of initial environmental and social examination of a solar power project in Nauru in the Pacific and a proposed wind farm in South Sulawesi, Indonesia. Conduct of E&S assessment for a wind farm in Ilocos Norte and liquefied natural gas plant in Batangas, Philippines. Development of design and E&S assessment for a sanitary landfill in Norzagaray, Bulacan, Philippines. Business development study for hazardous waste management for a potential investor. Her academic qualification is she completed her BS degree in civil engineering in UP Los Baños cum laude in 1995 to 2000 and top of the SEAT graduating class. Completed her MS degree in environmental sanitation at Ghent University in Belgium in 2002 to 2004. Visiting researcher in Tokyo Institute of Technology in 2007, she earned a diploma in leadership and development management from the Ateneo Center for Continuing Education in 2015. Let us all welcome Engineer Mylene Palaypayon-Ana.
Thank you, Roldan and Jat. Can you hear me clearly?
Yes, po.
Okay, let me share my screen. I hope works. So please bear with me because my presentation will include 3 YouTube videos that I'd like to share to all of you so that you'll get an appreciation of what I do as an environmental engineer. Okay, so again, thank you, PICE, UPLB, for inviting me to share with you my experience in environmental engineering. So as mentioned earlier, I have been an assistant professor at the University of the Philippines way back in 2004 to 2008. So it took me, I spent 6 years, in fact, at the academe teaching environment engineering or sanitary engineering back then. So at that time, I was practically involved in developing the course curriculum for environmental engineering, or we call it back then sanitary engineering. So the reason for calling it sanitary engineering was because historically, sanitary engineering has been the name that has been coined way back in the 1800s or the 19th century when the awareness for environmental protection has grown back then. So at the time when environmental engineering or sanitary engineering was coined, the primary intention of the curriculum was to be able to develop programs in order to avoid contamination of water and wastewater, so or generation of wastewater at the time. So very focused yung field ng sanitary engineering at the time on treatment of sewage in order to protect the existing environment, surrounding environment. But then throughout years, so it evolved. So the sanitary engineering evolved, and now it's coined environmental engineering. So if you'll take courses on civil engineering, say for instance in the US, you would have a degree of civil and environmental engineering in your diploma. So kaya siya nun. So now, why did I pursue environmental engineering in the first place? So back then, when I was doing my civil engineering course at the time, I had a professor from the university at UP Los Baños who just finished her master's degree in Australia. So she finished her environmental engineering program, and then she said at the time when she was doing her lecture that, you know what, environment will become one of the in-demand professional fields in 10 years' time. So that was way back in 2000, siguro mga around 1998 when I took the course of CE for sanitary engineering at the time. So when I heard that, it actually got stuck in my mind. So I got inspired by her teachings and the learnings that I got from her. And then at the time, I already had a clear vision to myself that I will pursue environmental engineering. Okay. So when I finished my civil engineering course, I immediately took the board, and then I was invited to become an instructor at the University of the Philippines. So, but then at the time, maraming courses akong tinuro. So I taught structural engineering, I taught geotechnical engineering, yung discussion ni Andre kanina, and even soil mechanics yung sa laboratory in collaboration with Ag and department. So it was a very diverse field, I thought at the time, and I said, okay, I need to focus myself, and I need to emphasize my career path into environment. So fortunately, I got a scholarship in Belgium in 2002, and I immediately pursued my master's degree. So that opened the door for me in practicing my environmental profession. So after graduating master's, I went to the university. I served at the university as an assistant professor, and then I continued teaching environmental engineering. And at the time, so we developed the program for environmental engineering at the time. So the vision at the time is for us to establish course curriculum for these specific fields. So in order to do that, we need to establish increase awareness on environmental policies, on issues in the country, in the Philippines, and delve deep on such themes you see on the screen right now. So perhaps some of you have already taken courses in environmental engineering, and these topics were discussed to you. So solid waste management, hazardous waste management, water supply engineering, wastewater engineering, and sludge management. So these topics are discussed on a 2-semester program. But as you understand, the field of environmental engineering is very diverse. So that said, I want to know from the audience now. I want to know. Can I cue in Paul, please, from the organizers of the event from PICE? Yeah. So that said, I want to know from all of you if one of those topics that's shown in the screen sparked interest. So what topic are you most interested in? Seeing some votes now. Thank you. Still coming in. So we have 100 participants, I believe. It's okay if you're not decided yet, or if you're not interested, you can select others. All right. So the top notcher would be water supply engineering. Very interesting. Okay. Thank you. Thank you for the poll. That gives me an idea of your interest. Share results. Okay, can you see now? So it appears that most of you, of the participants of this webinar, has an inclination on water supply engineering. Thank you. Thank you for that. Okay, let's move on. Okay, now let me link those theories that you learned in school, or you're going to learn in school, into what the industry looks like. It may not be a comprehensive presentation because of time limitations, but I hope that this would give you an idea of things that we do in the industry. Okay, firstly, I need to show this slide to you so that you can understand what drives development, what drives the project in the Philippines and globally. Okay, so why is it that we're building buildings? Why is it that we're into developing sewer system? Why is it that we're treating water and so on? So back in when I graduated, at the time we call it Millennium Development Goals, and there were only about 5 at the time, if I remember it correctly. And so it evolved to what is now called the Sustainable Development Goals. So there are 17 Sustainable Development Goals that drives the movement of economic progress in our country right now. So the first one is that it says there in the slide, no to poverty, zero hunger, good health and well-being, quality education, gender equality, clean water and sanitation, affordable and clean energy, decent work and economic growth, industry, innovation and infrastructure, reduce inequality, sustainable cities and communities, responsible consumption and production, climate action, awareness of effects of climate change, protection of life below water, and protection of life on land. And last, the 2 last ones are peace and justice, and strong institution and partnership of the goals. So that said, if you will look into the website of Sustainable Development Goals, if you try to Google that, the Philippines has only reached 65% of all of those 17. We're only at 65% practically. So we've so much more room to grow. So we have a lot of things to do in order to achieve the 17 goals. And the target for achieving these 17 goals is 2030. So assuming you're on your 4th year or 5th year of your university degree, now is 2021. So would be an increasing demand for growth in the coming decade or the next 8 years or 10 years or so in order to achieve the sustainable development goals. So for talk, I'd like to focus on goal 6, which is on clean water and sanitation, goal 7 on affordable clean and energy, access to affordable and clean energy, and goal 11, whereas yung goal 12 and goal 13 to 15 can be touched on slightly. Okay, so this slide shows you the network of water and wastewater treatment in Metro Manila. So kahapon nabanggit siya. In fact, I watch all the presentation because I want to link all the things that were talked about in the past couple of days. The last presenter, so I thought I'd stitch them all up and so that you can have a comprehensive understanding of your interest and what you'd like to become when you graduate from your civil engineering course. So this slide shows you the network of water and water supply and wastewater. So kanina sa poll, you mentioned that water supply strikes your interest. So in this regard, in Metro Manila alone, in fact, there are several networks of water supply that have been designed by Manila Water and NILAD. So when we envisioned the curriculum back then, itong sa CE department ng UP Los Baños, I know that some of you are not from UP Los Baños, but then in some other courses, you would also encounter yung water supply. So at that time, we had a strong collaboration with Manila Water and Maynilad. And when I was teaching the course back then, I had sent students to Manila Water and Maynilad to do practicum, to do thesis. In fact, one of my students at the time was the first female person to pursue the thesis on sedimentation and wastewater treatment, particularly for potable water in Manila Water. So there was a very strong collaboration at the time, and we made sure that the students who will graduate civil engineering would pursue would go to an industry to pursue their career. So that's why I've shown it here. But what's lacking now is the expertise or the knowledge on wastewater treatment. So kakaunti, I think not a lot would pursue on wastewater. Kanina nakita ko dun sa poll na medyo, although it's second yung wastewater, marami pang opportunities, or there are so many projects that are being developed at the moment for Manila Water and Maynilad and Metro Manila for connecting all the houses in sewer lines. Okay, so ang gito ni Melvin kahapon, naalala ko kahapon, sinabi niya na marami pang, I think about 60% pa ang kailangang i-connect sa wastewater treatment facilities. It's a really long-term solution to environmental protection of our Pasig River. Yesterday, there was a question about that, about pollution of Pasig River. So in order to address that, we need to make sure that our sewer lines, our houses are connected to a system that enables to treat the wastewater before it is disposed to the existing environment. Okay, so when I was at GHD, I also had the opportunity at looking into the networks of pipelines or network pipelines in Metro Manila and connected to an STP. This is the figure that's shown here. And so as from an environmental perspective, what I did was to go around, have a walkthrough and inspect the sewer outfalls on the rivers and see how if they are connected, and see whether there are discharges that are discharging wastewater of brown color or high turbidity or high suspended solids. So we had to take water samples, and we had to bring those samples to the laboratory for testing. And then we created a profiling of the water quality using GIS maps. So that's the application of GIS in this field of wastewater engineering. And then we submitted it to the developer, to Maynilad, for planning of the sewer networks. Okay. All right, so this is not a comprehensive list. This is an example of the industry or companies where you can do your internship. As I've said, back then we had a strong collaboration with Manila Water and Maynilad. We were sending students to do their practicum and internship in these companies. And they do have a very rigorous program. As explained by Melvin yesterday, he did 6 months of training to complete his internship or cadetship in Manila Water, if you heard him yesterday. But if you would like to pursue water supply and wastewater treatment outside of Manila, you would have to go to the local government units. So meron kayong water districts, and then you coordinate them and ask if there are opportunities to pursue design of water supply and wastewater treatment facilities. So what I can perhaps share, that some of the developers in the provinces are opting for yung mga groundwater wells. So yung knowledge nyo on geotechnical engineering would come into play, and hydrogeology would come into play, so that you can understand where to possibly tap a well that could be distributed to a localized water supply network. Okay, so those are some examples. Okay, let's now move on to power sector, kasi this one is closer to my heart. I have established, like since 2008, I had been exposed to hydropower engineering. So my career, in fact, was had a long history on hydro, and I myself, I'm married to a civil engineer also, who is also an alumnus of CE department, and both of us are into hydropower. So what I'd like to share to you in this slide, or this YouTube, let me see if this works. Can you see it moving? Or I have to share it from YouTube. Roldan?
Yes po. Pero does it have sounds?
Wala. So I'll talk you through it. Yeah. Okay.
Thank you.
So I'll talk you through it. So this one is in Angat. So in Angat, that is a dam where it has been established long time ago. So panahon pa to ni Marcos. And at the time, it was established to provide or to establish a water reservoir for water supply of Manila. So when Angat, all of the hydropower facilities in the Philippines are being privatized, or are privatized now, in order for it to become sustainable, as I explained earlier. So in order for it to be sustainable, they invited private investor to invest into hydropower developments or existing hydropower facilities in the Philippines, so that may long-term budget for its maintenance. So I was invited to become an environmental consultant of this hydropower facility in Angat by K-Water. So K-Water is a Korean investor who bought into the Angat hydropower, and they formulated Angat hydropower facility, or they call it Angat Hydropower Plant Corporation. So my task at the time was to investigate environmental impact of the rehabilitation of Angat, Angat Dam. So back then in 2015, at the time, it was found that Angat is lying on a fault line, that the dam itself, and they had to rehabilitate the face of the dam in order for it to become more stable. So kanina binanggit ni Andre yung slope stability and all that. So apparently after investigation, the slope of the dam is a bit steep, and so they had to put more fill on the rock face of the dam in order for it to become stable. So they had to reduce the slope of the dam and make the base wider in order for it to become stable. And then let me just go to the dam itself. Yeah. So this rehabilitation, I was not there at the time when it was built, but because I moved now to here in Amsterdam when it was being built back then in 2018 to now, just recently they finished it. So they put rocks. So yung kaninang pinakita is the quarry site. So I was standing right on top of the quarry site, and I was looking at the potential impact of building or excavating the quarry site into the ditch of the quarry. Where will it lead? Will it cause pollution? How much vegetation will be removed? And will there be any issues on stabilization and so on? So I was there to investigate that, and then I was working with the team. So I was working with the team of biodiversity specialists, ecology specialists. So there was a flora and fauna specialist who was doing the bird survey, who was doing the fauna survey, and I was also working with a person who's doing the water quality. So I'll zoom it now. So now you can see here the rock fill that has been built. But if I go forward, because we don't have enough time, so this is the area where you launch. So we deploy the boat to take water samples at the reservoirs, because we want to establish if the activity will cause any increase in turbidity in the reservoir itself, because this is a source of water supply for the entire Metro Manila, and we want to ensure that the activity will not result in any pollution. Okay, so we had to take water samples. So we deployed the boat. We took samples upstream and downstream of the dam and compared the results. So for environmental monitoring, the scope there would be in order for you to assess whether there's a change in the levels of parameters such as suspended solids in the reservoir before and after construction. Okay, so I'll skip some of this is the spillway. They did not do anything on the spillway. I don't think they did anything on the spillway. They did not change that. Okay, now I'll move to, so I'd like to show you the construction camp. I also did an audit of the construction camp. Okay, so here you will see there's an area where when I talk about environment, you only don't think about the physical environment. So you also think of social, because social is part of your existing, so to speak, environment. So there are people here, in fact, indigenous people, the Aitas, who have been living at the crest of the dam. So it's not safe for them to be there during construction or even during operation. So as an environmental and social professional, we designed a resettlement action plan for them in order for them to live in a safe place. So we designed a place where they can live harmoniously together with their chosen environment. And we also protected rights. So indigenous peoples in the Philippines is being protected by what we call the National Commission on Indigenous People. So this NCIP reports to the Office of the President. And so these IPs need to be protected, their rights need to be protected, and they need to stay where they are because they have traditional ownership of the land. So those things need to be considered when you are developing a project that is going to be funded international financing institutions like the World Bank, the Development Bank, and so on and so forth. So I'd like to pan now to show you the view of this is the camp, so construction camp. So what we did here was to ensure that the contractor, I think Hyundai at the time, has established their camp in an environmentally acceptable way. So we inspected their, let me go back, we inspected their camps, we inspected their lay down area, their technical installation, we inspected their facility to segregate, if they're segregating their waste, where they're collecting their waste, where they are disposing their waste, and so on, where they transport the waste, and so on. So these things, as an environmental professional, I have to make sure that the investment coming from an international financing institution, in this case, they looked at the Netherlands to finance the project. So the Netherlands Bank had to make sure that the investment that they will be putting in, the money that they will be putting into the development is protecting the environment and protecting the community. And so my obligation as an environmental and social professional is to make sure that these investment is an environmental and social standard of the bank are being adhered to. Okay, so I'll now move on to the next slide. Okay, so this is now the project that I'm currently working on, and it's in Georgia, in Angat. After Angat, so this one is the Greenfield project in Georgia. Georgia, the country, not Georgia in the United States. Can you see it?
Yes, po.
Okay, thanks, Sir Dan. So, etong project na to is very controversial. If you Google the project, you will see that there are a lot of opposition groups on hydropower. So I've been working on this project for what, 2 years now. And the reason why I'm here is that I am making sure that all the environmental and social standards of the investment bank are being adhered to. So environment, social performance standards of the bank are being adhered to. So this is a greenfield project. So meaning the environment is relatively pristine. It has not been touched. And so we need to make sure that the development of the dam is going to be in harmony with the existing environment. And if we're going to displace habitats, we need to make sure that these habitats that have been displaced are being offset. So if you cut X number of trees, you have to replace them with 3 times of number of trees in order to make sure that there's no biodiversity displacement and so on. Just sidetrack lang, no? This Engr Dam, I think, is the second highest arch dam in the world. So I had the opportunity to have a look at this, and this one borders that of. So amazingly, the dam is located in Georgia, but the powerhouse is located in Russia. So imagine they had to there's some political struggle there on how you will get back the energy from Russia to Georgia. So anyway, sidetrack. Okay. Let's move to environmental flow because that one interests the field of environment. So K-Water, the reason why I'm here, I'm involved in this project is that K-Water was a client of mine in Angat, and they have liked my performance, so they feel that I would become an asset to JSC Nenscra in Georgia, so they invited me to join there, and I'm still working with them at the moment. So yun, you need to build trust sa client ninyo when you're working with them so that you can have a sustainable relationship with them. So this project is going to be connecting 2 rivers. So this one is Nacra River. Nakikita ba yung aking pointer? Anyway, so that's the Nacra Weir, and then this one is the Nenscra Dam that's going to be built on Nenscra River, and then you have a powerhouse located about 17 kilometers downstream. Okay, and then it will be an asphalt face rockfill dam, and so it will be. It needs to release environmental flow. Okay, so what is environmental flow? I cannot share the audio at this point. So what is environmental flow? Environmental flow is the amount of water that you need to release so that the aquatic biota at the downstream section of your dam is going to thrive or is going to live. So because this is going to be a high dam, about 125 meters in height, it's not possible to do a release all the time. So what we will do based on the design is that we will build an underground low-level outlet so that the flow of water from the upstream reservoir will be released at the downstream so that our fish can have the ability to thrive and sustain at the downstream section of your dam. So that's what I think they will share the PowerPoint to you so you can watch the slide. If you're interested on the way how dams are built, you can view this on your free time. Okay, and this project also looks at dam safety because there are certain concerns about dam safety of the communities that are living downstream, and it also looks at landslide and risk management, landslide risks management. Okay, let's move on. All right, so that's for hydropower. Okay, the next topic is wind power. So ano naman tong wind power? I think this one is a 3-minute slide which I can share to you. Can you hear the audio or do I need to share sound? Okay, so as you can see, yung development ng wind power also looks into interplay of various fields. So as an environmental professional, I had to look at the potential impact of the building of the turbines in the community of Burgos. This is in Ilocos Norte. So we had to walk through, so this is the laydown area or the switchyard where the power will be transmitted to the transmission line. So we had to walk through the transmission line and understand what would be the impact of the transmission line to the existing environment. And at the same time, we also had to look at the effect of the movement of the turbines, because the movement of the turbine creates noise, vibration, yung wheezing sound. If you go underneath the wind turbine, you'll hear yung whoosh na sound. So if someone lives close to the turbine, you'll hear that it's annoying. So you need to understand if there are communities living close to the turbine. You also need to understand the impact of what we call shadow flicker. So what's a shadow flicker? A shadow flicker is that movement of the turbines, and it's the effect of the shadow to existing neighborhood or environment. So most of the time, yung siting, micrositing ng turbine also looks into the placement of your turbine in relation to your community. So titingnan mo rin yon. And there are certain models that are being run in order for you to assess kung yung house that's located close to the turbine will be exposed to shadow flicker, because it's very annoying. I think I can explain shadow flicker. If, for instance, you are working at home and you have this fan on top of you and then you have a light just behind the fan. So imagine the shadow that's created with that fan, that LEC, when you're working. So it's very annoying for the person who's exposed to shadow flicker. Imagine hilong-hilo na siya when you're exposed to it. So those things need to be looked at from the environmental perspective. But same with the hydropower for construction, you also need to look into these things properly, making sure that your construction site is in order, making sure that water supply and wastewater generation is being addressed, solid waste management is also being addressed. So the environment sector or environmental knowledge in such major construction facility requires understanding of environment. Normally, you appoint an HSE officer or environmental engineer or environmental manager when you it's actually a requirement if you're going to be financed or a project private investor comes into to invest into the major project that you're building. Okay, I will not show the entire slide because it's very long. So I need to now slides. Okay, so Nauru naman, this is solar. So Nauru, this is a very tiny country in the Pacific. So I had the opportunity to go to Nauru because they're gonna build a solar plant there. Nauru is a very tiny island of 13,000 people, and it's only 21 square kilometers. And we rely heavily on diesel. So kanina nabanggit ko yung clean energy, as one of the sustainable development goals, because Nauru is also a signatory to the SDGs. They need to achieve a certain target of less carbon emission. So they opted to do that by investing on solar panels. So yun. So yung project namin sa Nauru had to be built on a flat area, but the issue that we encountered there was itong mga pinnacles. Nakikita nyo itong nasa picture na to. Ganito yung terrain niya. So it's a lot of protrusion, and you have to blast them. So as an environmental professional, I need to understand the impact of blasting to yung impact on noise to the local communities, and how I would handle yung waste na ma-generate dun sa pag-blast nitong pinnacles na to. So also at the same time, because we need to think of development in a closed loop system, it's an island, it's a very tiny island. If solar panels have reached its lifespan, how are you going to dispose of the panels? So you also have to think about those things if you're going to build an impact assessment for a development as such. Okay, so these are examples of power companies that are developing renewable energy project in the Philippines. It's not an extensive list. You can search for it. If you're into the stock market, you can look into publicly listed companies who are building renewable energy projects and reach out to them if you'd like to work with them. So I would say that all of the fields that I mentioned to you come into play in the power development. So as I explained, when you're in a construction development, you need to think of all of these things in order for that facility to be managed according to regulations by the country and regulations of the financing institution. So for most of the projects that I have been working with, funded by World Bank, international financing institution like Asian Development Bank. In the case of NENSCRA, it's going to be funded by European banks. So they have very rigorous and very stringent policies when it comes to environmental and social. It drives the career. That drives my career, in fact, in this field. So with that said, I would say that all of the fields, in fact, are relevant in a developed power project. All right, let's move on. Okay, so briefly about this, nabanggit lang kasi in news article I've read just recently that the government will establish 300 more landfills in 2022. Ang concern ko dito is that it does not address the issue per se on solid waste management because sanitary landfills are built as an end-of-pipe treatment. So ito yung last resort mo. Normally, if you want to, perfect the process of solid waste management, we need to look at the entire life cycle. So, like for instance, here in the Netherlands, ang collection system dito is targeted to certain waste stream at specific time of the day. So yun. And at the same time, yung design ng packaging ng products na binibili mo, yung malalaking packaging so that the waste reusable, it's recyclable, you can treat them and so on. Whereas in most developing countries, kasi I think because of economic situation, yung mga tingi-tingi, yung mga maliliit na mga packets. So yun yung usually na. So the more packages you have, the more waste you generate and the more problems you have. So yun yung nagiging issue natin. So if you're interested in this field, I can talk more about this, but I'll have to move ahead now, I think, because of time. All right, so these are just, in the Philippines, the local government units are the ones responsible for solid waste management for each of the municipalities. In Metro Manila, it's MMDA, but there are certain private players for waste management. So Metro Clark, these are just some examples, and I'm working with some of them, in fact, on some developers that are trying to expand their facility. So I'll not mention them because it's a confidential project. But these are just explained. You can go to the link if you're interested in pursuing your career on this field. Okay. So now, finally, let me now wrap up my talk. I know you have a very long afternoon, but I'd like to share with you a few graphs or a chart here about how I have planned my career in environment. So it's really the passion that will drive you to go to the certain career that you'd like to pursue. So find that passion, take time to reflect, take time to understand what you are passionate about, what sparks joy to you, or what you think would be something that you could relate, because if you find that passion, once you find that passion, then you would be able to clearly plan your future and really understand what additional learnings you need to to undertake so that you can develop or deepen your understanding on that subject matter. In my case, it was very clear to me back then when I was doing my university degree that I'd like to do environment. I nurtured that. I took my master's in that. I practiced it in several, now it's like 21 years I'm practicing it. And even now, even if it has taken me a long time to practice the field of environment, I still feel that learning should not stop there. You know, that's why I listened to all the talks since yesterday. I listened to all what they said. And I had several takeaways from those talks, and it inspired me to, in fact, deepen my understanding on the other fields. So yeah, here you see that, you know, every person, according to self-determination theory, people are motivated to grow and reach by 3 innate and universal psychological needs. So the theory says that people are able to be self-determined when their needs for competence, connection, and autonomy are fulfilled. Okay. The other tip that I'd like to share to you is that it's not only hard skills. It's not only hard skills. You have to hone your skills. Okay? You have to be able to communicate clearly. You have to be able to articulate. You have to practice teamwork as well. And you also have to develop that sort of empathy. So the reason why I'm here, I'm doing environment and social, because I'd like to give back to the community. The scholarship that I received from Belgium is something that I will treasure forever, and I'd like to be able to give back to the community by practicing my profession and making sure that the time that I allocate in my career is being by the community surrounding the project. Okay, now to end my presentation, I'd like to share with you this picture quote. So I've seen this, and it relates to me a lot. So dream big and stay positive all the time. And when you found your passion, work hard for it, and develop your own skills around that passion that you've identified. And when you're working on this, like now, some of you are still starting your civil engineering. I think my question kahapon, the first year pa siya, and he's having difficulty with calculus. It's fine. You just have to enjoy the journey. You have to work very hard, but at the same time, enjoy the journey. And I think after you've gone through all of these experiences, you'll find it at the end of your journey, you know, like at the end of all those learnings and all that it's a fulfilling journey that you've fulfilled or tracked.